Capitalism often gets a bad rap, but what if all businesses were working for a better world?
Welcome to The Human Factor, the show where we explore social change through the eyes of social entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders. My name is Melanie Roussin, her name is Erin McCabe, and we are your hosts.
Today we chat to Charlie Syme. I met Charlie when we were both working at Oxfam, myself on Oxfam Trail Walker and Charlie as the voice behind Oxfam's fundraising appeals. But today, in amongst being on the board of directors for organisations like One Girl and Reach Foundation, Charlie is the marketing community manager at B Corp, a charity that provides certification for whether or not a B Corp certification is for you or how to get one for your social enterprise. Then today might just be your lucky day. So hi, Charlie. Thanks so much for joining us on The Human Factor. Please fill in the gaps in my intro and tell us how you would describe yourself.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's always a challenge to describe yourself, isn't it? I mean, I think Aussie humility always comes to play, but I consider myself an ethical marketer. So I actually read marketing and communicating products and services and actually, trying to get people to come on over and buy what I'm selling. But in terms of a value alignment, I've always done this for causes or products or things that I really believe in. So that's my simple intro of who I am in a professional sense.
Yeah, pretty standard not-for-profit job, if there's such one in the fundraising world, as the appeals manager at Oxfam, to working at what it could be considered a relatively new concept like B Corp.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was absolutely nothing standard about Oxfam, in my opinion. It's an incredible organisation, and I really think that Oxfam was, I think I'll always do an incredible job and just an incredible time. But the time came to look at other things, and I guess my personal interests were really in startup and business for purpose. It felt or profit for purpose, which felt like a new space. It felt like a new economy. And as much as I love player in the development of a better world, it did to me start to feel like this was an old model, and I wanted to look at new models. So I took some time out and I started to research what was happening in this space, and I really gravitated towards B Corp because of the rigor of the certification, because as we know, a lot of businesses these days like to sustainable and green and responsible they are, but how can we differentiate between what's good marketing and what's reality? So the rigor of a certification in this space, I think, is something that's been missing, and it's really powerful.
Absolutely. And so if we can start at the beginning, Charlie, so can you explain a little bit to our listener exactly what is B Corp and what is the one thing about the B Corp certification?
Sure. So the B Corp certification is it's a certification for a business. So it's for a whole business. So whereas Fair Trade is a certification for a product, and Green Star is a certification for the sustainable outputs of a structure, certification for the entire business. And so it looks at how a business impacts upon all stakeholders that impact upon a business, not just shareholders. So the stakeholders that the B Corp certification measures your impact upon: your employees, your customers, your governance structure, including your shareholders' environment. So it's a really holistic assessment of social and environmental impact of a business. And in taking this certification, it is completely transparent in terms of what you score, and there's an accountability because it is scored. And I think that's the really unique part about B Corp certification is there's a score, and there's a minimum score that you have to achieve in order to become about what people may not understand. In some ways, it's a decision that a business might decide to pursue B Corp certification, but you actually have to earn it. in that you have to get 80 points out of 200 in order to actually certify as a B Corp.
Cool. So after they've certified, say they certified just with the 80, can they then work at improving their score?
Absolutely. And tell the B Corps is that certification is not the finish line, it's the start line. So it really is important that it's a long-term commitment to being an ethical, sustainable, responsible company that really cares about the triple bottom line. So about people, about planet, and about profit. So all of them are for-profit businesses. It's not designed for government-owned entities or for charities. It's designed for, the triple bottom line approach to running their business. So we really work with a community that we have of the businesses, and they also work with each other. And I think it's a really important continuous improvement process, so that every time you recertify, which is every 2 years, the business is looking to score more. And big.
I absolutely love it. So for our listener who are actually weighing the pros and cons of a B Corp certification, what steps should they take first?
That's an excellent question, because it's a conversation I have a lot. So the most important thing to begin with, before we can even get started, is to find a values alignment. Or if you're an entrepreneur within a business who has the desire and the influence to make change from within, we need to figure out if this business is really committed to a long-term journey of being a really, truly ethical and sustainable company. It's not lip service. It's not greenwashing. This is a really sustained, committed B Corp and staying a B Corp. So first up, we need to find a value alignment. And, this term's been used a lot recently with a lot of current debates, but I think it's about being on the right side of history. I don't think the future will tolerate businesses that don't have any regard for the impact that they have upon the world or upon communities or upon their workers. So if we can find that, then that is the best possible place to start. Beyond that, really a business needs to think about some resourcing, because it's not an easy process. The fastest I've heard in our community was a CEO who did the entire certification while he was on holidays. He woke up at 5 a.m. every morning and did the certification, and by the time he had finished his family holiday in Fiji, usually it's a business making a commitment, and over sort of 3 to 6 months, various business units will get involved and they'll go through the steps of the certification and they'll certify as a business. So the first steps is to find a value alignment, and the next step is to get started. It's a free online tool. Anyone can go and have a look and log in. It's bimpactassessment.net. So the thing about it is it's free and it's all there. And so it's like being guided through, it's like having a consultant telling you about what are the best practice steps within governance, what are the best practice steps within HR, what are the best practice steps in terms of your environmental impact. So that's what I'd suggest to any businesses who are interested.
That's awesome. That's such a valuable tool for any organisations, aren't just in Australia. Tell us a bit about how B Corps actually came to be and what's their global reach.
Yeah, absolutely. B Corp is a global movement now. It began a little while ago, but really in the scheme of things, it's a very young movement. So about 10 years ago in the States, it was founded by 3 college friends. If you have a look online, you'll find some TED Talks in which they tell their story much better than I will. But the short version is that these guys, had a very varied business backgrounds. They were long-term friends, and they came together and they ran an apparel company together, and they were really successful. They made sort of basketball shirts and that kind of thing, and they ran this business according to their values. So they truly impact upon their supply chain and upon their community, and they donated time and equity and money, and they were a truly ethical business in the way that we would consider one. But the time came where they all wanted to go and do something else, so they sold the business, and they certainly had a good outcome from a financial point of view. Saw that it just changed dramatically, and everything they'd built was dismantled, and things were moved offshore, and cheaper and more disposable products were replaced with, their long-term sustainable products. And so this process of watching their legacy be dismantled kicked off this idea that this should be for the long term, and business should consider all of its stakeholders, and that business has a role to play into making the world a better place. So the three of them founded B Lab, which is the organization that sits behind the certification. It's a not-for-profit organization. And yeah, since then, I guess it's just grown exponentially across the globe. It's now, we've got B Lab organizations in right across South America, in Europe, in Taiwan, in East Africa, in Australia, New Zealand, and there's more popping up every time I check the map. And so there's more than 2,300 B Corps now. So it's not something that will explode in numbers overnight, because it is a very rigorous process, and it's really made a big impact in a relatively short space of time.
Is there a specific size business, Charlie, for applying for the B Corp certification? I mean, for those listeners who may have a smaller startup, for example, is that something that's accessible to them as well? Absolutely.
Businesses of all size can certify. Businesses of 0 employees, so just an owner, global businesses like Laureate Education, which is an American-based private education institution, and they've got universities all over the world, including in Australia. So there's big, there's small. It's open to any for-profit business.
Awesome. And I guess the 2,300 organizations, they would feel quite special. They've worked really hard to get this certification. They're all
absolutely, and it's a very powerful community. And one of the hallmarks of the community since the beginning has been an annual event called the Champions Retreat. And I was lucky enough to be at the Champions Retreat in Toronto just last month. And so this is an annual gathering of all the B Corp leaders from around the world. And they get together, and there's workshopping about what can we do together that we can't do apart. But then there's also just time to be together. And there's a saying that's developed out of these get-togethers that it's more important to be together than to be in agreement, which I really love. And I think it speaks to the diversity in the community, that they all come from very different countries and backgrounds and businesses, but there's a desire to. So they are a very special group of people. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So just more looking at your own career, you've worked in a variety of roles like manager, consultant, and even director. What would you say has been one of your most challenging moments to date?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. I think what I've found to be the most challenging part of all my roles, but it's also the most rewarding, is people and human resources. I think it can sometimes be, referred to as resourcing, which is a real sort of commodity. It really is. But human resources, I think, is a nicer term. But people are the most incredible part of every business I've ever worked in and every job I've ever had. But obviously, everyone's so different, and people come from different backgrounds and different ways of looking at the world. And so it's always important to invest the time to figure out how we can be a community at work, as well as trying to do the good work that we're doing beyond the organization. So I think that people are the best and the hardest part about every organization, and it's really worth all organizations investing the time to invest in their people.
Definitely. As a former marketing manager myself, I couldn't help but noticing that you're a consultant before as well to charity and for-purpose organization. So I'm curious to know if you have any insight on where our listeners should focus their attention in 2018, really in terms of, maximizing their effort in terms of their marketing and fundraising effort. So I'm talking to kind of the consultant in you, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I have a bit of a something that I always, and I guess it comes to, I wonder if you guys can relate in jobs you've done, but certainly in my years at Oxfam, I would often get asked that very common question of how much of my dollar gets to the field, and it's such a reasonable question, because I think it's if people are we're so used to being consumerist. So in terms of donating money to charity, we're giving money and we're getting nothing in return but just an idea or hope. And so it's a reasonable question that people ask, but it's actually the entirely wrong question. People ask how much of my dollar gets there, when really what they want to know is how much impact is my dollar having. Because, we would all know that sometimes you spend $4 on a coffee and it's terrible. So dollars is not a direct translation to a good outcome. So I think the question should always be, how can I have the most impact, or how can my dollar have the most impact? And I would really love it if in the charity and for-purpose community, the conversation were to shift to impact and away from dollars.
I think it all starts with the right question, doesn't it? Yeah, I love that. So what before Erin asked you about one of the most challenging moments of your life, and I'd like to kind of flip that around and ask you about one of the greatest ideas that you had. If you want to take us through that story on how you made that aha moment happen for you.
Yeah, sure. It's actually quite related to my last answer, because in my time at Oxfam, I was involved with the Unwrapped program, which is people buy a Christmas gift for a loved one, which is simply a card saying that I've purchased a goat for someone in Mozambique in East Africa. And I can't take full credit for this idea, because I had an amazing team around that. There's a lot of hope and a lot of trust built into this purchase, and that we needed to communicate impact more. And so the idea was to go to the field, to find a family that have just received a goat, and to create a piece of content that shows that the goats are real, and this is the family receiving their goat. So really to tell that simple story about the impact that your gift can make. And so that was the idea that we developed in the team. We developed a concept about what it might look like, and then we really just started lobbying internally, because it was a big organization and it's hard to get things moving sometimes. But persistence and doing your homework, and we had a brief, and sure enough, it's funny how these things go. After sort of consistent lobbying for a period of time, when it happened really fast. And I'll never forget the meeting that I had one day with the sort of the powers that be. And I walked out of the meeting and I had about 3 weeks to pack and plan a trip to Mozambique. It was all happening. So that was, I guess, the story. And when we actually got to the field and met this family, we met the local partners that work with the community, and we met a family, and they were just perfect. And I'm not sure they really quite realized what we were up to with all our fancy camera gear, but they were lovely people. And we were able to sort of spend a whole day with them, just videoing the the small that someone in Australia made, and we used that in our marketing to communicate to everyone who'd ever bought a goat and everyone who was ever thinking about buying a goat that this gift can really make a huge impact upon people on the other side of the world.
My favourite unwrapped was always the manure. So you could buy someone some poo, and I always bought that for my mum for Mother's Day, which she really appreciated. So I would have liked to see that piece of content. So speaking of communication, the idea of a B Corp is quite relatively new. Like, I know it's been around for a couple, like, over a decade, but it is still quite new in the space. So what I was wondering is, how do you communicate the importance of the certification to businesses and also to consumers?
It's a huge challenge, and I think we can all see across there seems to be a dumbing down of ideas. You know, politics is dominated by slogans, and there seems to be less rigorous debate going on than certainly even a few years ago. So it's really challenging, and good ideas that can change the world are not simple. They can't be. They have to be complex. So it is a real challenge to sell the idea of B Corp. So I guess using the basic principles that I've learned across my years and career in communications, it's about identifying your audience and what's important to them, and really trying to find a place of emotional resonance. So businesses, you know, it might be that being a B Corp is an amazing way to engage your team, and it'll give them an extra spring in their step when they come to work, because they know that their business cares about more than the bottom line. And it'll increase their retention, and they'll attract better staff. Sometimes that's a really powerful message that we can communicate to businesses. In other cases, it's of people who are going to change the world, and you should get on board and be on the right side of history. So some people really respond to vision. Certainly in some conversations we have, the idea of recognition for what they're already doing well is powerful. So it's a complex topic, and it's as you said, it is a new idea. Really, we just have to have a lot of conversations, and I guess use human empathy and identify what's important to people. And when we don't have the opportunity to talk on an individual level, I really just talk about the vision that we're trying to build an inclusive economy and a shared and durable prosperity for everyone. So that's apolitical. That doesn't come with any heavy idea. A world where everyone can live positive, meaningful lives and have jobs that have meaning and purpose. And I think that's something everyone can feel good about and can jump on board with.
Absolutely. So we are coming to the end of our interview. So for our final questions, we like to do a little bit of a lightning round. Just tell us the first thing that comes to mind. So our first question is, what are you most excited?
Most excited. I spent this afternoon with a B Corp who is refer to themselves as the Social Winery, and they make amazing, beautiful wine that we can all enjoy, and it's got a social mission attached, so that every glass you have makes the world a better place. And that always invigorates me when I hang out with these guys. So I'm excited about wine.
I'm excited about wine that makes the world better too. What is the best advice that you've ever received?
That's a great question. The first thing that jumps into my head was a somewhat rowdy piece of advice that I received not that long ago, and it was admittedly after a couple of beers, but the piece of advice was just step up. In a conversation of I guess a bit of self-doubt was creeping in, and this person with those simple words of step up, I think showed to me that they had belief that I could do it, and that was powerful. That meant a lot.
That's awesome. So, that's some advice you've received, but now we're asking for a few words that you could leave to our listeners that you.
Well, there's a concept more than a few words that I've come across recently that I'm a huge fan of, and it's called cathedral thinking. And cathedral thinking is the general idea that the amazing cathedrals that we can see and visit when we visit large, around Europe and various parts of the world, but I've seen a lot of them in Europe. They're incredible buildings of history, but there were many people that worked on these. In fact, thousands and thousands of people that worked on these buildings that never saw them completed. And in fact, the very people that designed these buildings never actually saw them built. So they could have easily been fallen into thinking that I'm just a stonemason or I'm just a glazier, but they actually believed and that gave their job a higher purpose because they were building something that would last forever. So I like the idea of working on something today that I'll never see, but I know that will make the world a better place.
I love that.
That is really hard to follow. So just to wrap up, you mentioned when you were talking earlier, company to get involved with B Corp, and you mentioned a website, and I might just get that again for our listener. You mentioned, I think it's called impactassessment.net. Was that the one?
So if a business is ready to go and want to start doing the assessment, they should go to bimpactassessment.net. And so that will, they'll create an account and they'll start answering questions straight away. If they would like to find out a bit more or to come along to an event, the Australian and New Zealand B Corp community, they should go to bcorporation.com.au. And we run regular events in all states of Australia. So there's plenty of ways to just come along and find out some more and get involved.
I think that's another big advantage because social entrepreneurs often feel isolated. I mean, that's the feedback that we get anyway. So that's another great way to, I guess, create that social network and to make the world a better place. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely. The community is incredibly powerful on top of what we're trying to achieve.
And is there anywhere that people can connect with B Corp or B Lab or even yourself on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fairly often on Twitter, avoiding all the fake news, but trying to just share articles and things in the world. And I'm at SEESYME.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Human Factor today, Charlie.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
The goodie bag. Good golly, Miss Melly. It's time for the goodie bag. That didn't really work, but what's in the goodie bag, Mel?
Yeah, that was lovely. So for me, I want to put something in relation to sexual harassment. So there's this guy from France,
David Schwimmer.
Thank you. Who actually produced a 6-part series on sexual harassment public service announcement. And he's got some pretty big name in there.
There's like Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City and Emmy Rossum in them, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So they're just kind of some short public service announcements, some short little commercial if you'd like. And they really kind of open our eyes on really sexual harassment. And it's something that's pretty close to my heart. We did a pretty big campaign across the university recently, and it's something that, there's an estimated 1 in 3 American women who experience sexual harassment. And here in Australia, we have 1 in 5, but I think it's pretty low. I'm pretty sure that's underreported. And even 1 in 20 men. So it's an issue that kind of affects both men and women. And I just really like them. And so we'll share them on our social media. But yeah, I just think that they're really a cool little way to kind of say, oh, this may have happened to me. I'm not feeling comfortable. I need to kind of listen how I feel about that. And it's just not on.
Yeah, I think what I liked from the one that you just showed me is the how it can happen. It doesn't have to be a big deal for it to be considered sexual harassment. It's anything that just makes you feel uncomfortable. Like it doesn't have to be overt to still be sexual harassment. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and it's just unwelcome. I guess that's the idea. And what are you putting into the goodie bag?
So I am putting in a search engine, which is lame. No.
Super not lame.
So this is a search engine called Ecosia. And so Ecosia was actually started in 2009 out of Germany. And they describe themselves as a social business, which means they use 80% of their profits from the ad revenue that is produced through their search engine to actually plant trees to fight deforestation. So rather than using Google, you can go to Ecosia and, if you click on an ad, a promoted ad, any of that, so 80% of that ad revenue actually goes towards planting trees in various countries around the world. What I really like about them is that they're very transparent and they actually publish tree planting receipts and all their financial reports too. So literally you can go on there right now and find their financial reports. They do put a thing up saying, we have a 6-week delay on our financial reports just so that we can get everything sorted. And you can actually see this is how much ad revenue that they raised. This is how much is going to paying, their employees. And this is how much is where the trees are being planted. And then they have reports about all their partners as well. So rather than using Google, you can use Ecosia to do all your internet searching.
I really like what you just said in relations to A. I think it's super cool. But B, I think that it's really relevant to just what Charlie talked about when he talks about to think about the impact of our daughters. And I think that that's really related to that and to be transparent.
Yeah.
So nice little addition to our podcast today.
I don't think that they have B Corp certification. I had a quick look, but if they do, they're not advertising it. But maybe one for them to look into.
Oh, I like that.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please head to iTunes, subscribe, and leave us a review and a rating. We would suggest 5 stars, but really, you can do whatever you like. Your rating actually helps other people find the podcast, so we'd really appreciate it. Then please head over to our Facebook page, The Human Factor, and hit like and join the conversation. Tell us what you thought of today's episode. And if you have any thoughts or insights to add to anything Charlie said today, leave us a comment.
Or you can tweet us at _humanfactor or visit the website at humanfactor.com.au and leave us a voicemail or a message. This show is just one part of a community that really wants to affect and grow social change. So if you know someone that you'd like us to talk to or have any suggestions, please let us know.
You're all awesome. We'll see you next time.